So you've got me, I'm going to try to go through my presentation in like 5 minutes, and then June Russell from Grow NYC Green Market, and then we're going to have our breakout sessions. So the poll that you're going to see in your email is going to be you selecting your top 2 breakout sessions. So I'm just going to echo what Tor said. As a maltster, I actually think about farm and farm risk quite a bit because it impacts me and it impacts my customers and it impacts consumers, right? So what we're talking about today mostly is consumer marketing and getting consumers to have an awareness about the importance of grain in our food system and on our farmland and in our landscape. But once they are keen on this idea and they start demanding more of it, we need to make sure that we have the supply. And one of the ways that I think about next steps for the Grainshed and next steps for all of us is one way to secure that supply is really supporting the farmers. And one of the ways that I see farmers sadly failing is not having the right varieties and not knowing the right varieties of grain to actually grow. So Heather Darby was talking earlier about the decline in dairy farms in New England, and we know that there are a lot of dairy farms in New England that are looking for other ways to use their land and make that land profitable and make their families profitable. And so when I think about wanting to see these people succeeding that are entering the market, right? We don't want to just, Tor is an established farmer, and he talked about all the risk, but he actually is established enough that he has a lot of the equipment, he has a lot of the infrastructure, he has a lot of the experience to know which grains and which varieties of grains work well on his farm and work well for his markets. But we also want to see a new generation of farmers coming into this, and we want to support them. And like I said, one of the ways that we see them sometimes failing is they're not getting the right varieties or knowing the right varieties. So real quick, I'm just going to pop through a couple slides just to think about maybe something that the Northeast Grainshed could do in the future. So this is just planting a seed today real quick. So what should I grow? So there's a lot of options, right? If you're thinking of growing food grade grains, do you grow a winter variety, a spring variety, hard, soft, white, red, 2-row, 6-row, naked, hull? How do you know what to grow? It's a question. Considerations. What's going to yield well? What seed is available? Is it going to be susceptible to diseases? And who am I growing for? A lot of times you'll see somebody who's a farmer that's getting into this and they go and they ask the brewer, what should I grow? And the brewer may not have any information about that, or they may ask the baker. But again, sometimes they ask the maltster, but you might get different answers and you might not know which variety you're supposed to grow. Luckily, we have people out there, if we can coordinate together, that we could try to answer those questions. Out in the bigger picture, there are varieties that are selected and recommended. So the American Malting Barley Association every year puts out a list of recommended varieties so that if you're a grower, you could look at that list and you could say, okay, if I can find seed for this, I could grow this. So could we do that on a regional level? That's kind of the seed that we're planting today, is could we coordinate to do that? And I think we can, and we've talked about to a lot of the people that are involved about this already. We actually had dinner last night to talk about it. So this is just throwing out there quick, simple steps. Step 1, we already have this actually, coordinated variety trials. So we already know agronomically which varieties are going to grow well in this area, yield well, have good disease resistance. So we're really lucky that we already have that foundation. Step 2, analytical quality evaluation. So after that agronomic piece, what is the quality? So that was what Aaron McLeod talked about earlier. And again, we're really, really lucky to have universities in the Northeast that have the testing capabilities and the knowledge to know what is quality. Step 3, We have sensory evaluation techniques now for both malt and for baking. So there are people in this room that have been involved in trying to figure out which varieties make the best bread, the best crackers, the best pasta, the best matzah. So, you know, that kind of stuff is we already have people who are trained in sensory. Step 4, and we talked about this last night, we might not even need it, but could we have a pipeline where once we've decided something is good agronomically, it has good sensory qualities, could we start putting it through our supply chain? Could we have volunteers that are maltsters, brewers, distillers, bakers, millers, that are able to do pilot scale to say, okay, yeah, this variety seems like, or these 4 varieties seem like they have possibility. Let's start doing pilot scale testing. Step 4, production scale testing. So this would be where a malt house, a brewery, a distillery, a mill, a bakery would start putting these varieties. So maybe out of that 5, 2 rise to the top in the pilot scale testing. Then we could put those through some of our production systems, and we could check them against the varieties that are currently being used. And then we could put out a publication every year that people could reference, so that when the farmer asks that important question, what should I grow, there's a publication and there's some sense that we've all worked together to make a good suggestion so that that farmer has likelihood of success and knows that if they plant those varieties, there's a market that already knows how to work with them and use them and likes them, and that there's some sense of security there where there is generally a lot of risk. What a well-adapted variety can do for an industry. Well, when I started Valley Malt going back 10 years ago, brewers, when they heard that somebody was going to start a malt house, they said, well, you know, can you grow can you malt Maris Otter for me? That's like one of my favorite malts. And I started learning about this story of Maris Otter. And actually it goes back to a guy who was the son of a farmer who married the daughter of a maltster. And it was at a time in the UK where actually the state of barley and malt was terrible. And actually the UK was importing quite a bit of its barley from California and other parts of the world. And having the background that he did, E.S. Bevins decided that he was going to start doing variety evaluation. And since he had a malt house, or he had a wife that was, part of a malt house, he was interested in finding a variety that would grow well for farmers and that would malt well and that brewers would like. And he had that idea that he wanted to bring barley back to the UK, where it had been lost. And even today now, they just celebrated Maris Otter's, I think, 75th anniversary. And even though there have been varieties that probably have higher yields, there are farmers in the UK that continue to grow Maris Otter because it's a resilient variety that continues to yield modestly for them so that they know what they're going to get every year. And it's what maltsters like, and there's a demand out there from brewers. I mean, when we're talking about trying to have an awareness of grains, I say you ask any brewer out there, do you know a variety of barley? And if they do, it's Maris Otter, even if you're a brewer in the United States. So I think this is what we need to look at and see that it is possible, but it does take some coordination and some thought. And this is just an example of, again, when we started 10 years ago, this work was being done by people here in the room, Mark Sorrells, June Russell, trying to do similar variety evaluations and flavor testing with wheats in the Northeast. And Warthog was one of those varieties that rose to the top. And it's one of the varieties that's widely grown today. So it is a model, I think, that we just need to potentially coordinate a little bit better and have maybe some kind of publication or recommended varieties to make seed availability more ready, and also just have a better answer when a farmer asks, what should I grow? Thank you.